We've accomplished a lot together over the years. Yet for all the progress we've made, too often gerrymandering, when politicians draw voting districts to benefit their party at the expense of fairness, has stood in the way of even greater change. I think we can all agree that politicians shouldn't be the ones picking their voters. Voters should be picking their representatives. And it's up to us to make sure that's the case.
The capacity to fight gerrymandering is there, but it will only happen if we have a mobilized American people, if we have organizations like All on the Line helping to lead and galvanize the American people.
If we can return to our true democracy, we will see the communities that we want to be a part of. We'll see the world that we want to live in.
Folks. My name is Mallory Long, and I'm the training director at All on the Line, and I'm also your moderator for this evening. I want to start by welcoming you all to our program. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are so excited to have Attorney General Holder and President Obama here with us tonight. And I'm sure that I don't have to tell anybody on this call that we are 25 days from Election Day. At All on the Line, we've been working away in our target states to educate voters about their options to safely and securely cast their ballot in this election. But we've also started planning for a once-in-a-decade opportunity to protect and secure the ideals of our democracy, and that's the redistricting process. The redistricting process has actually started in some states and will begin in many more in the months to come as we head into 2021. So that's why we're gearing up right now, and that's why we're really excited to talk to y'all tonight, because we know that elections and redistricting do not exist independently of each other. Each has a tremendous impact to affect the other. And that's why tonight we're going to talk a little bit about both. I know that you are here to hear from our distinguished guests, so I want to get us started. Attorney General Holder, a leader in the fight against gerrymandering, and the president who appointed him, President Obama, are here with us this evening. So without further ado, I want to pass it over to 82nd Attorney General Eric Holder. AG Holder, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Mallory. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And for those of you who are new to All on the Line, welcome. All on the Line is the grassroots campaign that is fighting to end gerrymandering and to restore, some fairness to our democracy. Now, I understand that there's a lot happening in the country right now. We're in the midst of what I consider an existential presidential election, maybe the most important election of our lifetime. And on top of that, we're still, grappling with a health crisis. Millions of Americans are out of work. We have gone through another summer of protests over policing, and we have seen, seemingly endless barrages of misinformation and attacks, on the right to vote. So, there's a lot going on. I understand that some of you may be, feeling a little down, maybe a little disappointed, and I get that. But I got to tell you that I also feel hope. It's what drew me to the president who's going to speak after me back in 2008. I still feel that sense of hope. And I think that you should too. The fact is that despite how, dire the situation is for far too many of our fellow Americans, as citizens, we have the capacity to change directions. We have the capacity to put us on a better path. We can and we must change our political leadership in this election season. I mean, that is clear. Everyone needs to have a plan to vote. Don't wait until the last minute. Don't wake up on November the 3rd and decide that you want to vote. No, make a plan. Make sure that you're going to vote in a way that's going to maximize your chances to make that vote count. Vote early, and make sure also that you vote, all the way down the ticket. There is so much on the line in this election. Will we build on the progress that we made in the Affordable Care Act, or will we have coverage ripped away from millions of Americans? Will we have leadership that not only recognizes, the very real and very immediate threat of climate change and puts us back on a more sustainable path, or will we continue to have a president that calls it a hoax? I mean, think about that. Will we have a president and a Congress that pass a renewed and reinvigorated Voting Rights Act, or will we have to endure more attacks, on the franchise? And will we have leaders at the state and local level, very importantly, at the state and local level, who support a fair redistricting process, or are we going to have we're going to have to endure another decade of partisan and racial gerrymandering? Those are just a few of the issues that are on the ballot this year. Because in a lot of ways, this election, I think, is an inflection point for this country. What has to be a critical step in a much bigger project to rebuild America, to bring about necessary changes that are going to make us a more fair and more just society. So, we have to do everything in our power to get out the vote this November. Don't listen to the disinformation. Don't focus on the conspiracy theories of what the president and the Republicans may try to do. Stay focused on what it is that you can do. Get educated on the voting process in your state. Get your friends and neighbors educated on the voting process in your state, and then vote. Get your friends and neighbors to vote. We the people, all of us on this call, and millions more like us, we're going to be the ones who decide this election. And once we win, I want you to take a couple of days off, just a couple, 48 hours, because you've earned it after all the work that you're going to do over the course of the next month. But then we got to get right back to work and start to focus on the redistricting process. Because, the fact is that what happens in the redistricting process in the states in 2021 and all over the country are going to help determine the next decade, the next 10 years of politics in the United States. Gerrymandering, when self-serving politicians handpick their voters, has contributed to the polarization and to the gridlock, in our politics. It's going to be our job, all of us who are here today, to end this era of partisan gerrymandering. We need to support fair maps in every state to ensure that, our elections are based on a battle of ideas and not on who's in charge of drawing the lines. And if we get redistricting right, it can be the key that unlocks progress on a whole range of issues. Because with fair maps, we can roll back discriminatory photo ID laws. We can replace them with measures that expand access to the ballot. We can attend attacks. We can end attacks on our LGBTQ friends and make sure that they enjoy full equality under the law. We can pass expanded background checks and finally kick politicians who are in the pockets of the NRA, out of office. Progress on all of these issues and so many more is possible. But to get there, we need to ensure that our democracy works the way it is supposed to, that we have elections where the people actually get to decide who wins. So that's the job before us, rebuilding our democracy to make it more fair and equitable. And that, I think, requires us to do everything that we can in this election and then keep going at it for the next couple of years. Now, that's going to seem daunting, but it is within our power as citizens. It's within our power as a movement. And I know it's possible. And so many of you know it's possible because we brought about great change in America before when we helped elect the man we're about to hear from, my dear friend, Barack Obama. His, in some ways, seemed at the beginning an improbable quest, and yet it happened. It happened. And if you remember the spirit of the nation in 2008, the accomplishments over the next 8 years, that's the kind of change that we can bring back to America again. So, Mr. President, thanks so much for joining us today. And thank you for all the support that you've provided in our fight for fair maps. Mr. President.
Well, thanks, Eric. And it is wonderful to be with everybody all across the country. First of all, I could not be prouder of Eric and the great job that he did as Attorney General. And I could not be prouder of his current effort. And I want to tell you why. About a week ago, maybe it was earlier this week, a Republican senator made the claim that we're not a democracy, and then indicated that it wasn't so important that we focus on our democracy. And he rationalized it. Technically, we're a republic and this and that and the other. But what he was indicating was a spirit that we've been seeing in one of our major political parties. And it's not new. It's one that has been with us since our founding, that essentially says democracy is for some people and not everybody, that actively restricts voting, initially very explicitly to white males with property. If you were a woman, if you were a person of color, if you were not wealthy, then democracy didn't necessarily apply to you. There were a lot of checks and balances and what are called anti-majoritarian elements to our Constitution. It's the reason why a small state like Wyoming gets 2 senators, just like California, even though it's got 1/60th of the population. So historically, there's always been this contest between, do we have a democracy that includes everybody, all of the American family, whether they're women, people of color, folks who live in cities or live in rural communities. And over time, through struggle and marches and protest and litigation, we broadened our political family so that everybody had a seat at the table. Now, that's what my dear friend John Lewis was about when he was marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That's what the suffragists were about. That's what so many of us fought for as we tried to make voting easier rather than harder and more restrictive. And one of the key ways that historically people have been disenfranchised, so their vote is worth less, is through gerrymandering, which basically just means we're going to draw maps of congressional districts or legislative, state legislative districts that are rigged so that even if in a particular state there are more Democrats than there are Republicans, and more people cast their ballots for Democrats, they could still end up getting less seats because some votes end up counting more than others. And they're packed or distorted in ways that disadvantage one party over the other. And this happens every 10 years, right after there's a new census. In 2010, when I had just inherited a big financial crisis, an economic crisis, and people were understandably in a pretty dark mood, we lost a lot of state legislative seats and gubernatorial seats, and Republicans who then took over immediately drew a whole bunch of maps that hugely disadvantaged Democrats and advantaged Republicans across the country for an entire decade. That redistricting is coming back up, and because the census is coming back up. And it is important that we do not let that happen again. Keep in mind, what we're fighting for here is not for Democrats to have an unfair advantage. We just want everybody's votes counted. We just want to make sure that a nonpartisan process is set up so that voters choose their elected representatives rather than the elected representatives or the party in control deciding whose votes are going to count a little bit more and whose votes are going to count a little bit less. And our entire effort here is to make sure that the system's not rigged, that it works the way it is supposed to. Now, the single most important thing we can do in the next 25 days is to make sure that we have a massive voter turnout. And the NDRC is fighting against voter suppression efforts in various states. It is making sure that we're pushing back against misinformation that might discourage people from voting. They're doing organizing on the ground. They're making sure that we've got lawyers protecting people's vote, making sure that mail-in ballots are going to be counted. So there's a lot of work to be done, but the most important thing we can do is to vote. And look, I obviously am going to be voting for my former vice president and hopefully soon to be president, Joe Biden, as well as his running mate, Kamala Harris. But there are a lot of other races that are going to be at stake in this election, all the way down the line. Senate candidates, congressional candidates, state legislative candidates, and local officials, all of whom are going to have the power not just to make immediate decisions about whether people are able to retain the protections they got through the Affordable Care Act, not only whether we're going to take seriously things like climate change, whether we're going to be able to do serious reform around our criminal justice system, all the issues you care about, but they're also going to be in a position to see whether we can start restoring basic fairness in our democracy and make sure that maps are drawn fairly, that voting rights are protected, that everybody is allowed to participate as I think we the people and our Declaration of Independence indicates should be the case. Our first step is to make sure that we all vote, that we have a plan to vote, that we're not waiting last minute, that we're getting our friends, colleagues, neighbors, communities, churches, synagogues, mosques, you name it, everybody's getting out there and making their voice heard. But our next step is going to be to ensure that the structure of our democracy is once again a model for the world. Because right now, unfortunately, we're one of the few advanced nations in the world in which we actively make it more difficult for people to vote, and we actively make our system less fair than it should be. And that's what Eric and everybody on the staff of this organization are fighting for. I hope you are going to be part of that fight. The first step you can take is to make sure that everybody's turning out in massive numbers in November, but alongside that, we also need you to get educated on what redistricting is about, how it has ended up disadvantaging and tilting the playing field in ways that don't make sense. And then we're going to have a lot of work to do post-election to sustain our efforts to ensure nonpartisan districting, fair districting, voter protections, ballot access, and we create the kind of system that everybody should want. This shouldn't be a partisan issue, by the way. It has become a partisan issue only because you've got one major party in this country that has made no bones about the fact that they want to make it harder for some people to vote. And they want to dilute the impact of some people's votes. And they say it explicitly and they act on it explicitly across the country. Frankly, we right now have a president and a Senate Majority Leader who's said as much, and you've got a bunch of folks at the state levels who are saying the same. We've got to push back against that. The first step is to vote. Second step, follow up in terms of making sure that the census and redistricting process is fair and above board. So I know we've got a bunch of questions. We don't have a huge amount of time, and we've got a lot of people on the line. I'll turn back over to Mallory, and I think she's going to be facilitating these questions.
That's right. Thank you so much, President Obama. And thank you, AG Holder, also for your remarks. It is such an honor to have you both here today. I know that our audience always looks forward to hearing from you and really takes your words to heart. Like President Obama said, this next section is our Q&A. I am very excited about our Q&A this evening. We asked folks all over the country to send their questions in to President Obama and AG Holder. So we have a few of those questions here today. We're ready to go. We're going to start, actually, our first question will be from Dr. Brenda Fairfax in North Carolina.
Good afternoon, President Obama. I'm Dr. Fairfax of North Carolina, and I'd like to ask you some questions. What actions can we take now to stress the importance of our young voters? And the second part to my question is, how can we ensure that these young African-American voters are engaged in the election process from this point on, especially since there are several HBCUs in North Carolina and the students are severely impacted by gerrymandering? Thank you, President Obama.
And thank you to Dr. Fairfax for submitting her question. President Obama, do you want to start with your answer?
Well, Doctor, thank you for your question. Look, voting is the single most important power granted to us as citizens. And I know that in the past, there are times where people feel as if because we don't get 100% of what we are looking for, we don't see as much progress as we'd like on a bunch of issues, that sometimes people say, well, voting's not going to make a big difference. But let me just take myself as an example. Because not only was I elected, but also we had a big House majority and we had a big Senate majority, despite all the obstruction that Republicans put in place. We got 20 million people health insurance that didn't have it before. We provided protections for people with pre-existing conditions to make sure that insurance companies couldn't discriminate against them. We saved the economy and we saved the auto industry so that millions of people who might have otherwise lost their jobs didn't. We were able to ensure that we started making serious progress on climate change and actually started bringing down the rate at which the poisons, the carbon dioxides that are being sent into the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases that cause climate change, the pace at which those emissions were being put out there. We were poisoning the planet a little bit less. Whatever issues you cared about, we made progress on because people voted. And keep in mind that in some states, like North Carolina, which we won, it was 2 votes per precinct that had an impact. So it's not speculative to say to people that every single vote counts, because in these elections, in many states, they really do. With respect to young African Americans in particular, and I've got a couple of daughters who actually have been active, and so is Eric with his kids, talking to their peers about it. I think the danger sometimes for young people, as well as a strength, is they don't have very long memories. That's a strength because it makes you optimistic. You're not worn down by some of the frustrations of the past. The danger is that you don't remember how hard you have to vote, how hard you have to fight for the progress that has been made. And we just lost an icon in John Lewis, who was the age of some of those young folks at HBCUs. And at that age, when you could be beaten or killed to try to exercise your right to vote, he was out there fighting to make sure that not only was he able to vote, but people who looked like him all across the country were able to vote. Right now, young people don't have to make those kinds of sacrifices. They've just got to have a plan to go out and cast their ballots. And we saw the inherent activism among many of those young people during the protests in the wake of George Floyd's killing. But what I've said to young people is protests alone are not sufficient. If you want to have an impact on who the district attorney or state's attorney is in your community, so that if there is a police misconduct situation, that in fact police are going to be charged. If you want changes in police procedures so that officers are being trained to work with the community as opposed to against the community, and that when people take wrong actions, they can actually be fired or charged. All those things are dependent on elected officials. And if you don't translate the righteous anger and frustration that we saw evident this summer at the ballot box, you can keep on protesting, but nothing's going to change. And listen, nobody knows better than me that even when we vote, even when we get elected officials who care about the issues we care about, change is still hard, because there are a lot of ways that the opposition party and special interests and lobbyists can block change. The fact of the matter is that you get a bunch of stuff done. You don't get everything done. We're not going to immediately transform the criminal justice system so it has no racial bias. But Eric Holder, when he was Attorney General, changed sentencing policies so that prosecutors didn't go for the maximum on every single drug case, for example. And that lessened the number of people who serve maximum sentences. That's an example of a concrete shift. Eric Holder would investigate and ultimately obtain consent decrees because he had reinvigorated the Civil Rights Division so that local jurisdictions couldn't do some of the racially biased practices that they'd done in the past. That's concrete change. That's how change happens, but it only happens when you vote. Eric, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Sure. I think, Dr. Fairfax, yours is a good question. Young people are now the largest cohort of potential voters in the country. And if they start to show up to vote in force, they can, as the president just said, they can change politics at the federal level, but also at the state and local level. And the fact is that, so many of the decisions that our leaders make today, so many of the actions they take or they don't take, they're going to have repercussions for decades down the road. And so young people need to care about who goes into office now. Climate change is probably is a prime example, but criminal justice reform, economic opportunity, healthcare. I mean, all of these are issues that are going to impact the future direction of the country. And young people, it's going to involve your lives for, a great many years. With North Carolina, I've actually spent some time with students on the campus at North Carolina A&T. And we literally, this is actually true now, we walked down the line that was drawn through the middle of their campus to crack their voting power. I mean, right down the line. One side of the line was one district, the other side of the line was another district. And I will say those students really gave me hope for the future. They were distressingly young, but they were also impressively committed to the causes of justice and voting rights. And we need that kind of fervor in our young people. I think what the president said is really important. And if you look at our founding fathers, they were young people. The only old founding father was Benjamin Franklin. The other folks were like in their 30s. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence at the age of 33. And so young people have huge amounts of power. They've got vitality. They've got optimism. It's an untapped thing that, if tapped, can change this nation for the better.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Attorney General Holder, President Obama, for your answers. We're going to move on to our next question, which is from Vernita in South Carolina.
My name is Vernita Lights, and I live in Port Royal, South Carolina. My question is a tribute to Hamilton. First, let me congratulate everyone involved in the present and ongoing success of this initiative. It is important to the safety of our democracy. My question is, what is the most important thing we, the people, can do to prevent gerrymandering?
Thank you so much, Vernita, not only for your question, but for our evening entertainment portion of the program. We appreciate it. And just to repeat that for folks, Vernita's question is, what is the one thing we, the people, can do to stop gerrymandering? President Obama, do you want to start?
Well, I'm not going to sing my response because she had a much better voice than I do. The most important thing you can do is, we already talked about, which is voting, because redistricting is done by state governments. Under our Constitution, this is not something that's done at the federal level. It's done state by state. So whoever has control of state legislatures and governors' offices are the ones who are going to determine what these maps look like. That's why Eric emphasized it's not enough just to vote for the president, vice president, or even senators and members of Congress. You've got to vote for state representatives, state senators, governors, where the governors are up, secretaries of state. Those offices have a huge impact on whether or not elections are fair and whether you get fair maps. So that's priority number one. Priority number two, respond to the census, because if you're not counted, that's going to have an impact in how various state powers are allocated. And frankly, and disturbingly, we have a president and an administration that seems to be doing its best not to count people who need to be counted, but who they'd prefer not being counted, particularly people of color and lower income folks. So that's going to be a priority. And then the third thing you can do in some states, and Eric can talk a little bit more about this, there are already grassroots initiatives taking place to try to get non-partisan redistricting processes in place. And what that means is, instead of Democrats or Republicans, whoever's in charge, making the decisions about who it is that they want representing them. Instead, what we do is you end up having professionals who are not biased saying what's the most sensible looking map to be drawn objectively. And where those states have adopted nonpartisan districting, it ends up having a huge impact in terms of the makeup of those congressional delegations and those state legislative delegations. And by the way, it doesn't always advantage Democrats. There are going to be some places where Democrats are disadvantaged by a fairer map. That's okay. The point is that what we don't want is constant abuse of that process. And that's what we're fighting. And then the final thing you can do is support this organization that you're on with right now. NDRC, I always get my alphabets mixed up on this, but this is a critical, probably the most critical organization that's fighting this good fight all across the country. And if we can make sure that they have the support, that NDRC has the support and the resources to get the organizers, the media and digital outreach, the attorneys and so forth in place. Not only are they working hard right now to protect our voting rights and our ballots in this upcoming election, they're going to make sure that we have a fair system for decades to come.
Yeah, and I would just add, I would say that the president was spot on. But if you want to be engaged with All on the Line, that we give you a number of ways to get engaged in the fight, to end gerrymandering specifically. So go to allontheline.org/takeaction. That's allontheline.org/takeaction. And you can find all the information you need to volunteer, to attend meetings in your community, or to chip in a few bucks, to help the cause. I mean, if you want to keep, doing this important work, and I'm asking you to do that, President and I are asking you to do that, then sign up, for next month's volunteer call. And please keep your eye out for text messages that we're going to be sending out from the team later on tonight. But again, go to allontheline.org/takeaction, and you can find out specific ways in which you can fight gerrymandering.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. That actually does bring us to the end of our Q&A portion and to the end of our program this evening. So we'll start with we'll finish, I should say, with some closing remarks. But first, I want to say thank you again to President Obama and AG Holder for joining us before I kick it back to AG Holder for any closing thoughts.
Well, I'd close this way. We, I think, too often underestimate the power that we have as citizens to have an impact on the direction of this nation. And the reality is that the great social changes that we have seen in the United States of America have come about when the people, decided that they were going to organize, commit themselves, and then make the necessary sacrifices to bring about that change. And we still have that ability. We still have that power. And this is a time for us to, to organize. This is a time for us to be committed. This is a time for us to be prepared to sacrifice, to make sure that the changes that we need are actually put into place. Dr. King said that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice. But here's the deal. It doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when people like you put their hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. Barack Obama is a shining example. Young community organizer, did a whole range of good things in that role, continued throughout the course of his life, became president, and changed this nation, for the better. And from that experience, from his life, I get always a sense of hope, renewed hope. And that's, I think, what we should feel now. So I'm asking everybody, get involved with All on the Line, fight for this country that we all care so much about. And if you do that, we'll have a better America. 2021 will be better than 2020, and 2022 will be better than 2021. We can do this.
Thank you, AG Holder. President Obama.
There's a reason why folks try to suppress the vote. So even if you're cynical about your own power in voting, think about it. Why would folks go to so much trouble to make it hard for you to vote if it weren't for the fact that they knew if you did vote, things would change? Eric mentioned young people in particular. If young people voted at just the same rate as people over 50, not more, just at the same rate, that would transform America. If folks 30 and under voted at the same rate as folks 60 and over, we would already have climate change legislation, immigration reform, criminal justice reform, serious gun safety measures, higher minimum wage, greater worker rights. Whatever your issue, the country would be transformed. So we need you to vote, but more importantly, we need you to believe that our democracy is something worth investing in and preserving, and it starts with you. I've said this before, the most important office in a democracy is not the president, it's not the attorney general, it's the office of citizen. And when we're active, informed citizens and we are paying attention to how the game works, good things happen. And when we don't, cynical people, folks who only care about power, folks who only care about money, they fill the void. And we've seen too much of that. It's up to us to make sure that doesn't happen again. And the good news is, if we are voting, if all of you are volunteering, if you find out more about what All on the Line is doing in your state and in your local community, we can not just ensure fair elections this time out, we can ensure fair elections going forward. And we'll get a virtuous cycle in which, in each election, the people's will and representative government grows stronger and stronger. And I've seen the entire country, and I've seen people from every walk of life. There is goodness and decency and common sense in the American people that is not currently represented in our government. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the system doesn't allow that to happen. We can make that happen, but it starts with you helping us get over the hump. All right? And everybody, stay safe out there. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Obama, Attorney General Holder. Again, I don't think I have the words to express how appreciative we are of you being with us this evening, just 25 days from Election Day. We know that folks are very busy, so I will just remind folks one more time, don't forget to visit us at ontheline.org/takeaction. Otherwise, we'll be in touch with y'all soon. Good night. Have a good night, folks. Thank you.
See you guys.